On July 2nd, the CEO of Palantir said something that every enterprise tells him in private. These models have been completely oversold. Companies are paying for tokens that create no value, and they are livid. He says open source models are good enough, and Palantir can build an application layer that makes those models precise. On the same day, a senior NVIDIA executive said the future is every business running a customized open source model on hardware they own. Two signals from opposite sides of the industry pointing at the same conclusion. The API pricing model is breaking, and that break creates a specific consulting opportunity for anyone who can deploy a model behind a firewall. The past 2 years trained every company to rent intelligence by the token. $200 a month per user at Anthropic. Volume pricing at OpenAI. The assumption was that frontier models would stay behind paid APIs forever. That assumption just cracked. On Reddit, the BetterOffline thread on the Palantir CEO comments hit 957 upvotes and 157 comments in one day. The community reaction was 1 part glee at the schadenfreude and 1 part genuine recognition that the emperor has no clothes. NVIDIA's AI lead called closed APIs the AOL and prodigy of this decade, walled gardens that open standards will overtake. When a hardware vendor says the software should run on your own hardware instead of their cloud, listen, because their revenue depends on being right. The primary play is not running a model yourself. It is deploying open weight models for companies that are stuck on paid APIs and do not know how to leave. Here is the full verification. Who pays? Mid-market companies with 50 to 500 employees who signed up for enterprise AI subscriptions 18 months ago and are now questioning the renewal. Palantir CEO Alex Karp said on July 2nd these companies are livid. The sentiment maps to a specific customer profile. A VP of engineering at a 200-person company currently spending $18,000 a year on Claude Pro seats plus variable OpenAI API costs. Another $8,000 on GPT API calls. They see the engineering budget disappearing into inference bills with no measurable output. They will pay between $5,000 and $20,000 for a deployment that replaces their API dependency with a self-hosted alternative that costs 50 cents an hour to run. Why now? For things converged in the last 14 days. On June 30th, Jipu released GLM 5.2 as open weight under MIT license. On July 2nd, an NVIDIA executive publicly endorsed self-hosted models. On July 2nd, Palantir CEO validated the pricing pane. On July 7th, Anthropic's free access to Fable 5 ends, which will force them to either cut prices or hold. Each of these events alone is noise. Together, they are a signal. The capability is here. The price gap is documented. The pain is public. The window opens now. Why isn't it captured already? The deployment market is split between two extremes. Large consultancies like Accenture and Deloitte charge upwards of $500,000 for an AI proof of concept that takes 6 months and requires a team of 8. Freelancers on Upwork and Fiverr bid on AI writing gigs at $50 a job, but do not know how to configure an inference server, set up rate limiting, or deploy behind a VPN. The gap between what the big firms charge and what a solo operator can deliver is roughly the price of a used Honda Civic. Companies at the 50 to 500 employee range are too small for Accenture's engagement minimum and too complex for a Fiverr gig. They need a working endpoint, not a strategy deck. They need someone who can show up, install a model, configure an API, and leave. What does the first test cost? $10 for a run pod, a 6,000 instance rented by the hour. 1 hour of setup time, including downloading the model, installing dependencies, and starting the inference server. $0 for the model software itself. GLM 5.2 or Llama 4 are free downloads from Hugging Face. The total cost of validating this play is $10 and 1 afternoon. The deliverable is a working API endpoint running GLM 5.2 that responds to queries at roughly 10 tokens per second on consumer-grade hardware. You can show that endpoint to a prospective client as a live demo. If you cannot get that running in one afternoon, the play is not viable for you, and you should move on to something that matches your skill set. What would invalidate it? Anthropic or OpenAI cut API prices by 10 times and make self-hosting no longer pencil out. Anthropic's free Fable 5 access ending July 7th is the first data point. If they convert free users to a significantly lower price, the margin on self-hosting consulting narrows. A second invalidation path is compute costs rising. If a 6,000 instances go from 50 cents to $2 an hour, the savings argument weakens. Watch both. The confidence level on this play is 65%. The uncertainty comes from whether the frontier labs will cut prices fast enough to close the gap before the consulting market establishes. The window is about 90 days. By October, either the API prices drop and the play narrows, or they hold and the play solidifies. The market will resolve one way or the other. You do not need to commit capital. You only need to build the capability. Watch list. 2 items that fail the gate but are worth tracking. First, the government's sovereignty push. Portugal launched an open-source model on July 1st. Reuters reported it. The concept is real, but there is no named customer, no published RFP, and no budget attached yet. What is missing is a specific procurement document with dollar amounts. Once a jurisdiction publishes a solicitation for an AI deployment that explicitly requires open source weights rather than API access, the watch list item becomes a primary play because the first mover in that jurisdiction has no competition. Until then, it is a story, not an opportunity. Second, Alibaba's 3 embodied AI models. Quinn Robot Manup, Robot Nav, Robot World. 38,000 hours of training data, all open source. The capability is impressive. The market is non-existent. There is no evidence of anyone paying for embodied AI deployment outside of research labs. What is missing is a commercial transaction. Watch the funding rounds, not the announcements. When a robotic startup closes a Series A for a general-purpose manipulation model priced above $10 million, that is the signal to move. Rejected. The idea that a solo operator should build a business around GLM 5.2 fine-tuning services was the obvious take from this week's research. It fails verification because the fine-tuning market for Chinese open-weight models is already crowded and the customers are price-sensitive. Our LocalLLaMA threads showed dozens of freelancers offering fine-tuning at rates below $50 a job. The margins are thin, the switching costs for clients are zero, and there is no differentiation between one LoRa adapter and another. A deployment service that charges $5,000 for a working API endpoint has better margins than a fine-tuning service that charges $50 for an adapter. The low end is a race to the bottom. The deployment gap at 5 figures is where the leverage is. Fine-tuning is a feature of the deployment, not a standalone business. That is the play. Deploy one open model for one paying client this quarter. Start with a $10 RunPod instance and a free model download this weekend. Do not build a product. Build a capability that you sell as a service. The next window is already opening. Subscribe so you do not miss it.